First contact gone wrong. The research vessel Horizon cut silently through the void, its sensors probing the unusual readings that had drawn it to this remote sector of space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the bridge's observation window, her dark eyes fixed on the strange crystalline structures floating in the distance. They looked almost like frozen fractals, geometric patterns that seemed to defy the chaos of natural space. "Getting anything new on those readings, Marcus?" She called to her chief engineer, who had been hunched over his console for the past hour. "Nothing makes sense, Doc," Marcus Rodriguez replied, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "These structures are giving off energy signatures I've never seen before. They're organized, but not in any way that matches known patterns of artificial construction." The Horizon had been dispatched to investigate what initially appeared to be a new type of stellar phenomenon. But as they'd gotten closer, it became clear they were looking at something engineered. The question was, by whom? Their answer came without warning. The crystalline structures suddenly pulsed with internal light, and before anyone could react, a lattice of energy beams connected them, forming a net around the Horizon. "Full reverse," Captain Maya Patel ordered, her voice sharp but controlled. "Get us out of here, now." But it was too late. The energy net contracted, and every system on the ship went dark. In the eerie silence that followed, the crew watched as larger crystalline structures emerged from the darkness of space, assembling themselves into what could only be described as ships. The beings that appeared on their view screens weren't anything like what humanity had expected for their first contact. They were crystalline entities, their bodies composed of geometric shapes that shifted and reconfigured as they moved. When they spoke, it was through direct transmission to the ship's computers, their voices cold and precise. "Organic vessel, you have entered restricted space. Your primitive biological forms have been deemed inefficient and hazardous. You will be preserved and studied before conversion to a more perfect state." Dr. Chen felt her blood run cold. These beings, these Nexites, as they called themselves, viewed organic life itself as a flaw to be corrected. To them, the messy, unpredictable nature of biological existence was an offense against the ordered universe they envisioned. "We are a peaceful research vessel," Captain Patel transmitted back. "We mean no harm and will leave immediately." The response was immediate and final. "Your departure is not permitted. Organic contamination must be contained and processed. Resistance is futile and illogical." As the crystalline ships surrounded them, Dr. Chen shared a look with her fellow crew members. They were about to face something unprecedented, an enemy that didn't just want to defeat them, but to fundamentally change what they were. The Horizon shuddered as it was drawn into what appeared to be a massive crystalline structure. Through the viewports, they could see other ships, vessels of clearly alien design, held in similar containment fields. They weren't the first to be captured, and the Nexit's facility appeared to be massive. Captain Patel gathered her senior staff quickly. "They may think organic life is inefficient," she said quietly, "but they haven't met humans yet. We're not going down without a fight, and we're certainly not going to let them convert us into whatever they think we should be." Dr. Chen nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. The Nexites were technological beings, yes, but their very nature as crystalline entities might present weaknesses they hadn't considered. She'd need time to study them, to understand their capabilities and limitations. As the Horizon was drawn deeper into the facility, none of the crew knew they were about to embark on a mission that would challenge not just their survival skills, but the very definition of what it meant to be human. The Nexites were about to learn that organic life, with all its supposed inefficiencies and flaws, had survived and thrived for billions of years for very good reasons. The game was on, and humanity's first real test against an alien civilization would not be fought with weapons, but with the very attributes the Nexites despised: creativity, adaptability, and the stubborn will to remain who and what they were, imperfections and all. The perfect prison. The Horizon's crew learned quickly that their crystalline prison was far more than just a holding facility. Through the transparent walls of their containment chamber, they could see vast arrays of similar chambers stretching in every direction, each holding different species in carefully controlled environments. Dr. Chen pressed her hand against the crystalline barrier, feeling its smooth, cold surface. The material wasn't like any crystal she'd studied before. It seemed to pulse with its own internal energy, and she could swear it reacted to her touch, albeit subtly. "They're studying us," she announced to the gathered crew in the ship's conference room. The Nexites had allowed them to remain aboard the Horizon, though the ship itself was completely powered down. Every chamber is perfectly calibrated to its inhabitants. Temperature, atmosphere, gravity, everything's customized. Marcus Rodriguez had been analyzing their prison using jerry-rigged equipment powered by emergency batteries. "The whole structure is like one massive computer," he added. "These walls aren't just walls. They're processing units. They're recording everything we do." Captain Patel stood at the head of the conference table, her expression grim. "We've seen 3 other species get processed in the week we've been here. Whatever they're doing to convert organic life into crystalline form, it's efficient." The crew had watched helplessly as the Nexites had taken groups from other chambers. The process was clinical, precise, and completely irreversible. The converted beings emerged as crystalline entities, their organic nature completely erased, their consciousness apparently preserved but fundamentally altered. "There's something else." Lieutenant Emma Foster, their xenobiologist, spoke up. She'd been quietly observing their fellow prisoners. "The Nexites aren't just converting random species. They're selecting them based on some criteria we haven't figured out yet. Some chambers have been here longer than others, but their occupants haven't been processed." Dr. Chen had noticed this too. "They're learning from each species before they convert them. This isn't just a prison. It's a research facility. They want to understand organic life before they eliminate it." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very beings that considered organic life inefficient were meticulously studying it, cataloging every aspect of biological existence before erasing it. But this revelation brought with it a spark of hope. If the Nexites were studying them, that meant they didn't fully understand organic life. And what they didn't understand, they couldn't perfectly control. The breakthrough came during what the crew had taken to calling feeding time. The Nexites delivered sustenance to each chamber through a complex system of crystalline conduits. Dr. Chen had been mapping these delivery systems when she noticed something extraordinary. "The crystals vibrate," she explained, excitement creeping into her voice. "Not just from mechanical movement. They resonate at specific frequencies. The whole facility is like a massive crystalline orchestra, with different sections vibrating in harmony." Marcus caught on immediately. "And when we get our food, the frequency changes. The crystals have to alter their structure slightly to allow matter to pass through." "Exactly." Dr. Chen pulled up a rough diagram she'd sketched. "The Nexites don't use traditional technology as we understand it. Their entire civilization is based on crystalline resonance. They're not just studying us. They're trying to figure out how to convert our organic patterns into crystalline frequencies." Captain Patel leaned forward. "How does this help us?" "Because," Dr. Chen smiled, "they've made 2 crucial mistakes. First, they've assumed that because we're organic, we can't comprehend or manipulate their crystalline technology. Second, they've forgotten that humans have been studying crystal resonance for centuries. We might not be able to match their level of crystalline technology, but we understand the basic principles." Lieutenant Foster's eyes widened. "Sound waves. If we could generate the right frequencies, we could potentially interfere with their systems," Marcus finished. "Maybe even communicate with other chambers." Captain Patel nodded slowly. "And they wouldn't expect it because to them, organic beings are too chaotic and unpredictable to master such precise resonances." "Precisely," Dr. Chen said. "They think they're studying us, but we've been studying them too. And we have something they don't: creativity. the ability to take existing knowledge and apply it in ways no one has thought of before. The crew spent the next several hours brainstorming. They had limited resources, just what was aboard the Horizon, but humans had a long history of making do with what they had. As they planned, Dr. Chen couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Nexates had created what they thought was a perfect prison, but in doing so, they'd given their prisoners exactly what they needed to fight back. The question now was, could they master the crystalline resonances before the Nexates decided it was time to process them? And even if they could, what would they find in the other chambers? The crew of the Horizon was about to discover that in their quest to preserve organic life, they might have to redefine what that actually meant. Breaking the code. The makeshift laboratory aboard the Horizon hummed with activity. Every piece of equipment that could be modified to generate or measure sound waves had been commandeered for their experiment. Marcus had even dismantled several musical instruments from the ship's recreation room, using their components to build crude resonance generators. "Hold it steady," Dr. Chen instructed as she carefully adjusted the frequency of their latest attempt. They'd been working for days, trying to match the precise resonance patterns they'd observed in the crystalline walls. The task was maddeningly complex. The Nexates technology operated on multiple frequency layers simultaneously, like a symphony where every note had to be perfect. "Got something," Marcus called out, his eyes fixed on a jury-rigged sensor display. The walls responding to this frequency. It's subtle, but it's there. Dr. Chen checked her own readings. The crystalline barrier was indeed vibrating in response to their generated frequency, creating a barely perceptible pattern of standing waves. It wasn't much, but it was the first real progress they'd made. Lieutenant Foster burst into the lab, her face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," she said, leading them to the observation window. In the chamber directly across from theirs, a species of bioluminescent beings had begun pulsing with light in a distinct pattern. "They're responding to our frequencies," Dr. Chen realized. "The vibrations must be carrying through the crystalline network. They're trying to communicate." Captain Patel joined them at the window. "Can we respond?" "Better than that," Marcus grinned. "If they can detect our frequencies, maybe we can establish a cooperative resonance pattern. Multiple sources working together would give us more power, more control over the crystalline structure." The next few hours were a crash course in xenolinguistics conducted entirely through light and sound. The bioluminescent beings, which the crew began calling the Lumini, proved to be natural allies. Their species had evolved in crystal caves, giving them an intuitive understanding of resonance patterns. Through painstaking trial and error, they established a basic form of communication. The Lumini understood what the humans were attempting, and they had crucial knowledge to share. They'd been prisoners longer than the humans, and they'd observed how the Nexates technology responded to different types of resonance. "Look at this," Dr. Chen said, pointing to her data display. "When we combine our frequencies with their light pulses, we get harmonic patterns I've never seen before. The crystals aren't just responding. They're amplifying the effect." Marcus nodded excitedly. "It's like we're creating a new form of resonance, something the Nexates never conceived of because it requires cooperation between different types of organic life." The breakthrough came when they discovered that the crystalline walls didn't just transmit energy. They stored and redirected it. By carefully timing their resonance patterns, they could actually influence the flow of energy through the facility's network. "We're not just making noise," Dr. Chen explained to the gathered crew. "We're learning to speak the facility's language. Every crystal in this structure is part of a vast communication network. The Nexates use it to control everything: environment, containment, even the convergent process itself." Captain Patel leaned forward. "Can we use this to escape?" "Better," Dr. Chen smiled. "We might be able to turn their own technology against them. The Nexates think organic life is chaotic and inefficient, but we're proving that different forms of life working together can create something entirely new." As if to emphasize her point, Other chambers had begun responding to their resonance experiments. Species they couldn't even see were adding their own unique signatures to the growing harmonic pattern. Each addition made the effect stronger, more complex, and harder for the Nexites to detect or counter. "They don't understand what's happening," Lieutenant Foster observed. "Their sensors are designed to detect and control specific types of resonance. This cooperative pattern we're creating, it's like nothing they've encountered before." The implications were staggering. The Nexites had built their entire civilization on the premise that crystalline uniformity was superior to organic diversity. But now, that very diversity was becoming their greatest weakness. Each species contributed something unique to the resonance pattern, creating a harmony that was far more powerful than any single frequency could be. As the crew worked to refine their control over the crystalline network, they began to realize that they weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were proving something fundamental about the nature of life itself, that true strength comes not from perfection, but from the endless variations and combinations that evolution creates. The Nexites had wanted to study organic life before eliminating it. Instead, they were about to learn a lesson about its true potential, one that would shake their crystalline civilization to its core. The prison they'd built to contain and convert organic life was about to become the proving ground for its greatest triumph. The Great Escape. The day of reckoning began with a symphony. Across hundreds of chambers, beings of all forms and origins initiated their carefully coordinated resonance patterns. The lumini pulsed their bioluminescent signals. Gaseous entities in distant chambers created precise pressure waves. Even species composed primarily of liquid contributed their own unique vibrations. At the heart of it all, aboard the Horizon, Dr. Chen and Marcus conducted this unprecedented orchestra of life. Every piece of equipment they'd modified hummed with purpose, adding human technology's voice to the growing chorus. "Energy levels are rising across the network," Marcus reported, his eyes fixed on their crude but effective monitoring system. "The crystalline structure is responding exactly as we predicted." Captain Patel stood at the bridge window, watching as subtle patterns began to ripple through the facility's walls. "How long until they notice?" "They already have," Dr. Chen replied, making minute adjustments to their resonance generators. "But they don't understand what they're seeing. To them, it looks like random fluctuations, system noise. They don't recognize it as coordinated action because they don't believe organic beings are capable of such precision." The Nexites' first response came swiftly but ineffectively. They attempted to dampen all resonance within the facility, but the pattern the prisoners had created wasn't just about sound or vibration. It was a complex interplay of multiple forms of energy, each supporting and amplifying the others. "They're trying to isolate the chambers," Lieutenant Foster reported, monitoring the facility's responses through their jury-rigged sensors. "But they can't cut off all forms of transmission without shutting down their own systems." That was the beautiful irony of their plan. The Nexites had built their prison to be perfectly efficient, every system interconnected. Now that very interconnection had become a vulnerability. The crystalline network that let them control their prisoners had become a conduit for rebellion. The first visible crack appeared in the chamber wall 3 hours into their concert of resistance. It wasn't a physical break. Rather, the crystal structure began to shift, its perfect lattice wavering, as competing resonance patterns fought for control. "Now," Dr. Chen called out. Every being in every chamber intensified their output simultaneously. The combined energy surge overwhelmed the facility's regulatory systems, creating a cascading effect through the crystalline network. The walls between chambers began to dissolve, not shattering, but rather reconfiguring themselves according to the new patterns being fed into the system. The Nexites had created their technology to be adaptive, able to respond to new conditions. Now that very adaptability was being turned against them. Captain Patel's voice rang out over the ship's comm system, broadcasting to every chamber that could receive it. "All species, begin Phase 2. Remember, we move together or not at all." The sight that followed was unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. As the barriers between chambers fell, hundreds of different species began to move in perfect coordination. Those who could fly carried those who couldn't. Stronger beings helped weaker ones. Species that could manipulate energy protected those who were vulnerable. The Nexites finally realized the full scope of what was happening, but their response came too late. Their crystalline warriors found themselves facing not chaos, but an organized resistance unlike anything their perfect, ordered minds could comprehend. "They're trying to initiate emergency conversion protocols," Marcus warned, noting alarm signals spreading through the facility's network. "They're going to try to forcibly convert everyone." But this too played into the prisoners' plans. As the Nexites pumped massive amounts of energy into their conversion systems, the escaped prisoners used their combined resonance patterns to redirect that very energy. The crystalline structure of the facility itself began to change, its rigid patterns dissolving into new configurations. Dr. Chen watched in amazement as the walls around them shifted like liquid glass, reshaping themselves according to the will of the combined organic species. "It's working better than we hoped," she breathed. "The facility isn't just responding to us, it's learning from us. The crystals are adopting organic patterns." The Nexites' perfect prison was becoming something entirely new, a hybrid structure that combined crystalline efficiency with organic adaptability. The very technology they had used to try to eliminate organic life was being transformed by it. In the docking area, ships of all designs and origins were breaking free of their crystalline restraints. The Horizon's engines hummed to life as power was restored. But they weren't fleeing. Not yet. "All species, hold position," Captain Patel commanded. "We're not just escaping. We're making sure they can never do this to anyone else." As the facility continued to transform around them, the combined species began the final phase of their plan. They weren't just going to escape, they were going to reprogram the entire facility, turning it from a prison into a testament to the power of organic diversity. The Nexites were about to learn that their quest for perfection had led them to overlook the greatest power in the universe, the ability of life, in all its wonderful variations, to adapt, combine, and create something greater than the sum of its parts. Evolution's answer. The transformed facility hung in space like a new kind of celestial body, neither purely crystalline nor organic, but something unprecedented. Its surface shifted in patterns that resembled both the precision of crystal formations and the flowing adaptability of living tissue. It was, Dr. Chen realized, a perfect metaphor for what they had achieved. The Nexites had gathered their remaining ships around the facility, but they made no move to attack. Through the facility's newly transformed communication network, the freed prisoners could sense their captors' confusion. The Nexites' perfectly ordered worldview had been shattered, replaced by something they couldn't classify or comprehend. "They're trying to understand," Lieutenant Foster reported, monitoring the facility's hybrid systems. "Their sensors are recording everything, but their analysis programs keep failing. They can't reconcile what they're seeing with their fundamental beliefs about organic life." Captain Patel stood on the Horizon's bridge, now part of a makeshift command center coordinating hundreds of freed species. "Perhaps it's time we showed them what organic life really is," she said. "Dr. Chen, are you ready?" Dr. Chen nodded. They had prepared a message, not in words or data, but in the universal language they had discovered, resonance patterns that combined the precision of crystalline structures with the adaptability of organic systems. Through the facility's transformed network, they began to broadcast. The message wasn't just information, it was an experience. The Nexites would see and feel how different species had worked together, how their various abilities and perspectives had combined to create something entirely new. "Look," Marcus pointed to his displays. "The Nexite ships, their crystalline structures are beginning to change." The crystalline vessels were indeed transforming, their rigid geometric patterns becoming more fluid, more organic. The Nexites weren't being forcibly changed. They were adapting, their crystalline nature responding to the new patterns they were encountering. A transmission finally came from the Nexite fleet, But it was unlike their previous communications. Instead of cold, precise data, it was a complex harmony of resonances that carried meaning on multiple levels. "They understand," Dr. Chen translated, her voice filled with wonder. "They're saying that they've been incomplete. Their pursuit of perfection led them to eliminate variation, but in doing so, they eliminated the possibility of growth." The revelation spread through both the freed species and the Nexate fleet. The crystalline beings had sought to perfect the universe by making everything uniform, but they had failed to understand that uniformity was itself an imperfection. True perfection, they were learning, came from the endless dance of variation and adaptation. Over the next several days, something remarkable happened. The Nexates didn't retreat or attack. They began to learn. Their crystalline technology, already transformed by the prisoner's escape, continued to evolve. It became a bridge between organic and inorganic life, allowing for communication and understanding that had never been possible before. The facility, once a prison meant to eliminate organic life, became something else entirely, a place of collaboration and study, where crystalline and organic beings could learn from each other. The Nexates' vast knowledge of energy and matter could be combined with the endless creativity and adaptability of organic life. "They're asking us to stay," Captain Patil announced to her crew. "Not as prisoners, but as teachers. They want to understand how we did this, not to eliminate organic life, but to learn from it." Dr. Chen stood at her old observation window, now transformed into an interface that let her perceive both crystalline and organic patterns in the space around them. "We didn't just escape," she said softly. "We proved something that will change this entire galaxy. We showed that strength doesn't come from eliminating differences, it comes from embracing them." The crew of the Horizon had set out to explore the unknown, and they had found something far greater than they could have imagined. They had discovered a truth that would reshape the future of all life in the galaxy, that the greatest achievements come not from the pursuit of perfection, but from the willingness to combine, adapt, and grow. As news of what had happened spread across the galaxy, other species began to arrive, both organic and crystalline. The facility became a symbol of a new kind of evolution, one that didn't eliminate the old to make way for the new, but found ways to combine and transform both. The Nexates had sought to perfect the universe by making everything the same. Instead, they had learned that the universe was already perfect precisely because it never stopped changing, growing, and creating new possibilities from the endless combinations of all forms of existence. It was humanity's first great victory in space, but not one won through weapons or warfare. It was won through the very things that made organic life appear chaotic and inefficient to the Nexates: creativity, adaptability, and the ability to work together despite, or perhaps because of, their differences. The age of conflict between organic and crystalline life was over. A new age of exploration and discovery was beginning, one that would draw on the strengths of all forms of existence. And at its heart was the lesson that the crew of the Horizon had taught the galaxy, that perfection isn't found in uniformity, but in the endless dance of diversity and change.